Policy Matters is a conversation platform which aims to provide reasoned analysis and context to the activities, reforms, and policies of the federal government of Ethiopia. Exploring various reforms the government is undertaking, the conversation platform aspires to enable nuanced and informed understanding.
Hello everyone, welcome to this edition of Policy Matters. Just to begin with, Dr. Getachew, there were a very serious reform package from the new administration back in June 2018, and even before that since April 2018. But what were like the baseline or the background when this administration took charge in that period? How do you assess the existing state of media in general?
Okay, thank you very much, Solomon. As soon as Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was sworn in as Prime Minister in April 2018, in his inaugural speech, he made it clear that there was democratic deficit in the country. And he also made it very clear that the media were among the very important pillars for a democratic system to thrive. He said, I remember, that democracy without a free and vibrant media would be unthinkable. So his government embarked on reforming the political space in general, and 4 areas of reform were prioritized, and among these is one among these 4 would be media, along with electoral law, the civil society's regulation, and anti-terrorism law. So, these 4 areas of reform working together were believed to bring about a significant amount of difference in the democratic space, in the democratic exercises in the country. So government did not spend much time before bringing together a panel of, like a group of top-level lawyers, very experienced lawyers, chaired by Professor Tlaun from Addis Ababa Law School, Addis Ababa University Law School. That council had 13 members, all experienced lawyers. So, and then this council, they were accountable to the Attorney General's office, and then what they did was they decided to come up with different working groups. And then one working group was the media task force that you chaired, I think, constituted of 15 top-level independent media professionals, lawyers, practitioners, academic. They came together to deliberate on the media landscape in the country. And they started off by conducting a very important diagnostic study. And one of the findings I remember of the diagnostic study was that during the time of EPRDF, the media were crippled. Of course, regulations existed, but they didn't materialize. The regulations themselves had some problems. They stifled the space in general for the media and freedom of expression. So the media during the time of EPRDF were, the Ethiopian media were among the worst in terms of the level of respecting freedom of expression in the media. International standards, international indexes of press freedom attest to this. We were one of the worst, and then Ethiopia was labeled as among the the worst jailers of journalists, and then the space for journalists to operate freely was also very limited. So they started to work against these backdrops, against this background. So I think you guys did a very good job of engaging all the stakeholders and making the process very open and participatory. And it all started like that. They brought findings of the study to public attention. Stakeholders came together, deliberated on it, and then had to make their own comments on it, some inputs, provided some inputs, and then the study was enriched. And that created the basis for the subsequent drafting process of the media policy and the media law. In fact, the media policy started a bit earlier with the former Government Communication Affairs Office, and then my own office, Ethiopian Broadcast Authority, inherited the process. And then, as opposed to the previous exercises, we started to make it very open. And then we brought together all concerned parties, including media practitioners, media owners, academics, and then that's how it. In fact, we were also supported by consultants, both international and local consultants, and they carried out a study and brought their findings to our attention, and then the media policy drafting process also started that way. So in principle, it is the media policy that comes first, and then the media law aligns itself with the policy, because the policy statement is the intent of the government. It shows the intent of the government. It, in broad sense, shows a relationship between the media and society. So what kind of normative theory of media would you like to follow? Will it be liberal? Will it be social responsibility theory? Like in the past, during the EPRDF rule, there was an attempt in drafting media policies, and then, or difficult to call it media policy per se, but in key policy documents of the EPRDF, you would find statements and some ideas that indicate to media policy. So overall, like the overarching principle during that time was in the kind of democracy, the kind of ideology they chose was revolutionary democracy. So they wanted the media to have a normative policy which goes with the ideology of the day, which is revolutionary democracy. So developmental type of journalism was prescribed, especially the state media, the public media, and those media outlets who had affiliation with the government were required to follow that variant of journalism. So there was no freedom for the media and the practitioners to choose what variant of journalism works for the country. So in the current policy, we wanted to make sure that there was no prescription whatsoever, no prescription whatsoever. So we had to make sure that, so it all had to come from the process and from the discussions. We were very open to international practices and standards. Part of the study was a comparative study of international practices, like you did in the media regulation drafting process.
Yep.
I think you could speak more to the process of drafting.
It was the policy and the legal framework or the drafting process, even if it was conducted by two independent teams, at the end of the day, they both see that there was leaning towards making media subservient to the interests of the ruling party, if not so much the instrumental aspects of the media, and that the independent existent and that it has like an embedded autonomy, that it's also linked to society, and it has also a role to ensure government's accountability. They both share, and at the end of the day, it was not very difficult to harmonize the policy with the existing draft. But with all that, and I also want to emphasize that it was a comprehensive reform, and when the media reform was being done, there are other parallel reforms for civil society and others, and it was helping even to actually ensure that the process was very open and transparency in the process. Yes, but with that finding and with this regulation, how do you see after 2 years of work, how do you see today the impact of the policy and also the ongoing law, and what kind of changes are now being achieved or in the process of being implemented?
Good question. I think the change is huge, and it starts with the commitment of the government. The government has been very serious, and my Prime Minister has been very clear and consistent with the freedom that the media needs to be granted. The media deserved that sort of, they needed it, they deserved that sort of freedom for them to be able to, in a meaningful way, play their role in the process of democratization in general. So it's not like you're not doing the media a favor by granting them their right. They needed it, they deserved it, they needed to be free. For the country's need to democratize itself is to materialize, you need that kind of political space. So one way you can show your commitment to a changed political space is by liberalizing the media, and that is exactly what happened. And in fact, before the policy was drafted, and even before the law was made, the government already started to show commitment. And then this has been witnessed by the international community. If you take the ranking in the Press Freedom Index, we've shown 51 levels of change. This is it's a leap. It's a huge leap by all standards. Unprecedented type of change witnessed by international organs like CPJ. So they said Ethiopia has shown a remarkable difference in its respect to press freedom. That's in recognition to this freedom, they decided to make the observing the International Press Freedom Day in Ethiopia, was observed in Ethiopia, so a couple of years ago. So that did not come by chance. And then this is, you cannot think of the international community to convene in Ethiopia and then celebrate the press freedom change Ethiopia has shown. So already started, and then we went into this process of drafting the frameworks to make this initiative lasting, this commitment of the government lasting. I think this policy and the media law, there are statements of reaffirmation of the commitment the government had already shown. And then, obviously, changes are already there. Government, since then, has not jailed journalists for for carrying out their journalistic tasks. Journalists they are free to express their views, So they're legally protected, and the policy says that, and then it's also indicated very clearly in the draft media proclamation. So among the changes the media law and the media policy brought about, it was the intent to restructure, reconstitute my own organization as independent and impartial organization, which is the media regulatory body, Ethiopian Broadcast Authority. So the way it will be restructured would be different from the past.
Maybe just to give a background, I mean, there have been so many uproar about the performance of the previous EBA when it comes to, even if it's constituted as an independent regulatory body, it was part of the apparatus that actually used media to suppress and also intervene in their activities. So against that backdrop, how do you see the restructuring also in comparative perspective?
Exactly. People were very skeptical about what EBA had been doing in the past. Going after the media and putting heavy hands on them, like firm control of the space, so which worked negatively, just did not help the media to grow as free, responsible, and vibrant institutions. So the accusation that the media were crippled and the government had a role in it comes from these kinds of practices. The legislation itself, the legislation we had in the past, which is 533 2007, Proclamation number 533 2007, in its provisions did not grant the media the kind of freedom they deserved in its licensing, in its regulation practices, in the way it's formed, the way it's accountable, attests to this skepticism, this accusation that it was very much government dependent or very much closely attached with the executive body of the government. Like in the past, when it was formed, the institution was accountable to Ministry of Information, and then when Ministry of Information was gone, dissolved, and then it became accountable to the Prime Minister's office. Again, another executive body. But lately, in the new policy and in the draft proclamation, it's going to report to the Parliament, the House of People's Representatives. So, in terms of accountability, it's very accountability different from the executive body. It follows a different line. It's new thing, a new practice, and also in the appointment of the leaders of the institution. In the past, it was the Prime Minister that appointed the heads and deputy director generals of the institution. So this time around, it's the Parliament which is responsible. It has a board. The board recruits able professionals, independent people with integrity, with expertise, with experiences and knowledge in the media discipline. They will be recruited by the board, which is also another independent body, and then presented to the Parliament. When the Parliament endorses, that is how the Director General and the deputies are appointed. And it's made very clear in the policy and draft proclamation that they will never be party members. They would not have a key role in the party structures. They should be responsible, fit, independent experts. And then also the board. It will have a 9-member board, all able, again, diverse in their profession, but most of them coming from the media disciplines, both the academic and practices and legal backgrounds, areas of expertise appropriate to the discipline. And they are required, again, to stay away from party structures and people who are not very closely associated with party structures. And 9 members, 6 of them come from civil society organizations, academia, and the media themselves, while only 3 of them come from the government. This is another very strong statement on the part of the government, a very, very important gesture and level of seriousness from the government. There is no intention of putting the hierarchy, the leaders, both in the board and in the secretariat, who are close to the government. So government is ready to let it go and then lead the industry by itself. And this is a very important step.
Maybe another thing in relation to the role of EBA is the role of media self-regulation. The sector itself were not there administratively, politically, and also legally. Now, one of the responsibilities of EBA is also help work when it comes to ethical and professional matters with the sector, the industry peer review mechanism itself.
So part of this regulation, we're going to follow a co-regulatory model. In the past, it was government. I should keep an eye on every media activity. But hereafter, the government is not going to act like that. In fact, the government is ready to allow the industry to regulate its practices by itself. So the self-regulatory mechanisms like the media council, the media associations, government will actually, when it's invited, help in strengthening these structures. So they will be very supportive, and then when they function, when they do their job very well, they will be very supportive of the government tasks. So we welcome those self-regulatory mechanisms, and we are here to support them. This was not the case in the past. Government itself wanted to constitute a self-regulatory institution.
Maybe another very fundamental change, I would say, is the plan to allow up to 25% of ownership in the media to foreigners. In the past, the policy direction was very clear that they are seen as a suspect and that they will interfere in the homegrown democracy. So how do you see the role of this injection of foreign capital and skill and also share in the investment landscape?
There is change in our outlook toward the foreigners, and especially to the Ethiopian diaspora. We see them as allies. We would like to benefit from their expertise, and also we want them to inject some finances. Media is capital-intensive industry, and then there is a lot of competition going on, and the technology, it keeps changing. So we want our media to keep pace with the changing, with the changing pace, with the pace of technology change. So if they get support, controlled kind of support, limited amount of support from the outside world, that would be a welcome. At the same time, you don't want the media landscape to be dominated and then also conglomerates coming and taking over very infant, yet to grow industry in the country. So we have learned from the international experiences that the percentage varies. Some countries 20%, some others 40%, they allow up to 40% involvement, participation of foreign capitals and foreigners. So in our case, in the draft proclamation and policy, we want to limit it to 25%, and we'll see what the parliament is going to say on that.
Yeah. Maybe one last point. The long overdue commitment to decriminalize defamation is already agreed on both the policy and the law, and also EBA's ways of taking measure from the previous very punitive and sanction-oriented approach. Now there is like a step-by-step approach to administrative regulation and also access to appeal to Court of Justice. How do you see that from the previous experience?
Broadly speaking, in the past, the approach was more of control rather than support. But these days, it's more of support rather than control. So we want to give the support a chance, all the way from capacity building. Part of it has got to do with lack of expertise. And one big gap we have, one big challenge we have is with a lack of professionalism. So we will embark on a lot of capacity building. We have already been doing this. And we'll intensify that. We'll build on what we have achieved so far. So more capacity building interventions. So as more understanding is created, and on the part of the officials and the general public, do more of media literacy. And then, don't get me wrong, defamation is still a big challenge in our country, but criminalizing it was in the past, we used to criminalize, penalize. If you get involved in one incidence of defamation, over, and then you will be accused. There were provisions in the legal frameworks allowing the government and the prosecutors to, to go into court. But this time around, it's less of that. Keep the legal measures, the harsh legal measures very far, and then, in as much as possible, use all other alternatives, starting from the self-regulatory mechanisms to administrative measures that are restricted. Even EBA's role is limited now. It's controlled. Because it's a regulatory body, it cannot take every kind of measure it wants to on the media because they violated one ethical standards of this. You give them a chance, and it's on the basis of their track record and their performance in the past, and also based on the chances that you give them, that you start to use those kinds of legal provisions. After using all other means of educating them, all other administrative, less punitive administrative provisions, and it's all only in the very last that you will be forced to use those kinds of measures. As a lawyer, if you have 1 or 2 points to say on that one, that would be good.
I hope that both the policy and the law would be instrumental, and they would serve as a springboard to create a very vibrant, professional, and strong media that knows its boundary and also promotes the interest of the public, and hope that they will also serve to resuscitate the damage that has done to the media in the previous 3 decades, and that they will all soon start to be implemented as planned and as envisaged in the policy. It was a pleasure talking to you, Dr. Getachew, and thank you for making time out of your busy schedule to be here with us. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Solomon.